Hello and welcome back to the SteelerFury.com podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the Message Boards, joined by the best colleagues that money can't buy. Will as Bradshaw to Ben and Korey as Korey39. Gentlemen, believe it or not, it's football season. I don't know about you, but football season kind of snuck back up on me this year. Like all of a sudden it was training camp and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for all those like stupid training camp headline crap. And sure enough, we had a few of those. We'll get to those here in a second. And then it was like, oh, we're cutting down to 53 and college football starting. And it's like, man, I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for some football, but it definitely caught back up to me this year. Maybe it was just a long summer. But how were your guys' summers? Did you enjoy this holiday weekend we just had?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I paid a whole lot less attention to preseason football because, you always look at it before and you're like, it's preseason. But after how the offense looked last preseason, and then what it looked like every regular season game, it's basically just useless.
Yeah,
So
you had to swear that off, didn't you?
Honestly, I think it was worse. The preseason football was worse this year and less meaningful this year than it's ever been. I think that most teams have now adopted the strategy that they're not really using those games for any kind of competitive thing whatsoever, and they're mostly using it to give the backups who won't be really getting many practice reps to give them some practice reps. So like your third string quarterback, and maybe look at some special teams guys because it's really hard to do special teams in practice these days. So, and some run game, for teams that don't run it in camp at all. So I kind of feel like it's just devolved into the worst football ever. They said it was I think it was the lowest scoring preseason in history.
Wow. I mean, that's not surprising. Like you said, teams have kind of figured that preseason is just preseason. They don't evaluate it like they used to. Like you said, it's more special teamers, which is interesting this year considering the new kickoff rule. Korey, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you on that since you are our resident special teams expert. What did you kind of think about this rule change? And Pittsburgh's actually replacing two of their top special teams guys from last year. James Pierre no longer here, and Miles Boykin no longer here. So, special teams has been something that Pittsburgh's had to look at just because they are replacing some guys to fill those roles.
So one with the kickoff rules, I think you could kind of see as teams got deeper into preseason, they started to figure out the return rules a little more. And, it's fun when guys kind of spring through. It's a bit quicker hitting. I'm still a little partial to the old kickoff rules. I kind of like guys flying down and the big hits, but this isn't too bad. I will say, I don't think our gunners are going to be very good at all this year. We lost Boykin, who was one of the best gunners in the NFL. We lost Pierre, which honestly, for how much he spent, like he is on the field more than I care about him being a gunner. I'd rather an actual corner be playing instead of having good gunner play out of him. So with that, in that regard, I don't really care about Pierre, but it's just an observation that even though we should have better punting this year, because Cameron Johnson's pretty solid. He's not going to like blow your socks off, but he's a solid punter. The gunners, we just don't really have them on the roster. We don't really have any receivers that really stand out. Like Scotty Miller and Roman Wilson aren't gunner types. Corners, you got Darius Rush, who's all right. So we don't really have those kinds of bodies this year. But I think the punting play should just be improved. The punting in general should be improved just because the punter. So I think the kickoff returns, you'll probably see some bigger returns early in the season. Teams start to figure it out on the kickoff end later. But all in all, I think we should still be pretty solid.
So you're saying what the Steelers opted for was to actually get better at punting the ball rather than covering the punt.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Well, just by the way, Korey's our resident special teams expert, but I'm the resident XFL and USFL minor league football expert. True. And so I saw a lot of this kickoff in the XFL. And the thing that makes it, what teams figured out about it, at least in the XFL, we'll see if it translates to the NFL, is that it's basically a running play. So they, imagine kinds of different blocking schemes that you can have on a running play, and imagine it being kind of like a short yardage running play where if you break through the first line of contain, you have a really good chance to pick up yards. And that's sort of how it's worked out. So there are teams actually doing running duo on it. There are teams that are pulling in players from one side of the field to the other for kick out blocks. And I think the teams that are creative about it will be able to be somewhat successful. But I think the pair to that is you got to have a returner that's essentially able to one cut and go at speed, as opposed to, in the previous kickoff, you really wanted to have sort of a sturdier guy who was able to withstand, getting hit. I think that's less of an issue now for the kickoff.
Okay. Gotcha.
Be also dominant in this new setup, or if it'll be preferential to someone a little bit more like Anthony McFarland, who is more of what I described in the first place and less of like a guy that's built to take hits. So I'm curious to see how it'll go. I don't think it'll have this like giant impact right away in any way, except the thing about the XFL was starting field position for the offense was a lot better. It averaged maybe 5 to 10 yards further downfield than the previous, last NFL season. So I think that's a key for offense for a lot of teams is starting field position. So that should theoretically lead to more offense, although it doesn't seem to be necessarily working that way in the preseason.
Well, it sounds like a really good opportunity for me to ask you guys a question, because it sounds like, Korey, and Will, you guys know what you're talking about here with this new rule. Formation wise, do you have to have 9 people on the line of scrimmage as a receiving team?
Yep, that's like the whole gist of it. Because if you put guys back, then you get the big run-ups again, and they make guys miss all that.
Okay.
The thing I'm not sure about, Korey, maybe is that can the 10th guy be on the line, or does he have to be? He has to be back, right?
I think they landlock the formations. I think you're pretty much, but then once the ball's live, it's free reign.
Yeah, as soon as it's touched.
Okay, that was one curiosity I had, because it was like, boy, if there's not an exact rule of how many people you have to have on that front line, you could get some really interesting things, kind of along the lines of what you said, Will, with the whole pulling and trapping and stuff. Like you said, you could just make that a run play, and all of a sudden you only have to block half the field for your guy to be gone. So, well, there goes that.
That's more or less what they're doing. They're picking the spot to attack, and you're hitting it with double teams or with some sort of pulling and kick out block kind of thing. And so it's they're essentially saying return's going to go to this spot, and we're going to either attack that with force going forward or some kind of cross action.
Gotcha.
And reverse is also really effective with that, because everybody's already sort of standing still. So if you change direction, as you might know, it's a little easier to change direction when you're moving than it is when you're standing still and trying to get a head start in the other direction.
Sure. Well, that's just one of the few, interesting things we have to look forward to this year, as far as what, just differences you're going to see in the league this year. But let's kind of get more into the Steelers offseason to a degree, not so much draft and stuff, because we've covered that, more, who's made the roster, stuff like that. Who was one guy who didn't make the roster, who I was really hoping would make the roster? Brandon Ayuk. Oh, wait, shoot. Sorry. He can't just make the roster. We would have had to have actually traded for him. So I don't know about you guys, but we'll dive into this for maybe just a few minutes. But do either of you actually think we ever had a real legit shot at landing Ayuk?
Well, quickly, just Jeremy, did you hear what the deal supposedly leaked of what the Steelers offered? Did you hear this?
No, I didn't.
So they offered Ayuk $300,000 total, less than TJ Watt's deal, because they didn't want to exceed TJ Watt's number, and they offered a 2nd and 3rd round draft pick both. So wow. I'm going to turn the tables on you and ask you, before we talk about do we think the Steelers were ever actually in it, would you have done that deal, a 2nd and a 3rd plus 27.7 or whatever it was per year?
Man, you definitely turned the tables on me. I was not ready for that. Personally, no, just because I feel like I can get a second, like a good wide receiver, in the first 3 rounds, especially with, in these last 3 draft classes, if you really look at it, you're finding good quality wide receivers in like the first 3 rounds, sometimes even 4. So I would say no, just because of the draft capital commitment and the money commitment. But that's just me. I'm not saying that Ayuk's not a good player, because he definitely is. And I think the deal he signed was for $30 million, so it wasn't like it was for a lot less than what the Steelers were offering. So, but just gut reaction, no, I want it, especially with how we have no answer at quarterback right now. Why would you pay that guy all that money when we don't even know who's going to be throwing him the ball next year? So,
yeah, all the better reason to not spend the picks either. Sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't realize this. I know we're not young, but we are actually the second oldest team in the NFL. And I mean, think about this. One, if maybe Justin Fields tore it up in preseason, or Russell Wilson looked like he was like a star again, maybe you could have talked me into like, okay, maybe you can kind of push some chips in this year because you are going to get, Super Bowl caliber QB play. But I mean, if either of those guys are, great, then not only are you kind of stuck where maybe you have to spend a first on a QB, but then you don't have a second or third to address it, and you're relying on a rookie, and we know that they probably wouldn't even take a rookie in the first. So I don't know. It's one of those things where if the circumstances played out a little different in preseason, it's not everything. That's kind of the whole point of what we said at the beginning. But I would have been a little wary of that move if we had made it.
Mm-hmm. And to answer your original question, Jeremy, I'm not sure the Steelers were ever really, really in it. I think there's a lot of potential deals in the NFL that are like on the table. Sure. Like, are we interested in Brandon Ayuk? Of course we are. He looks just like our coach. No, of course we are. He's a great player. But I think, you just don't get reported as much as this did because people went crazy with the concept that, the Steelers somehow were just one player away from the Super Bowl. And if they just got Brandon Ayuk, this would all, everything would change for them, and it would change their prospects and whatever. And he's a great player. It would have definitely helped their cause. But, I struggle with this idea that they're one player away. And, if Ben Roethlisberger 5 years ago had been the quarterback and they talked about doing this, yeah, we'd all been really freaking excited about it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, the bigger question is, at this point, the way the Steelers managed the wide receiver situation, they traded Deontay Johnson. They didn't really replace him with anybody who does the kinds of things that he did in terms of being able to play opposite Pickens and beat man coverage, beat press man coverage, play as an outside receiver in the league with some, with some success. And then when they drafted a wide receiver, it's almost as if they drafted a slot guy because they thought they were getting Brandon Ayuk or something was happening with the outside. I don't know what the mindset was for the Steelers, but whatever it was, it didn't really work out for them.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not act like, Ayuk was the only wide receiver that it seemed like they were interested in for a while. There was, talks that we were interested in bringing, it's not Cordero Sutton, Cortland Sutton. Sorry, I know that's not right. We have Cordero. Cortland Sutton over from the Broncos, to reunite him with Russell Wilson. I think there are a few other names thrown out there that, kind of got shut down fairly quickly because they either got
DJ Metcalf.
Yeah, Metcalf. Yeah, you're right. That was another one. Kind of forgot about him. But yeah, so I mean, it's not like Ayuk was the only wide receiver they were trying to trade for. I think they truly went into it with a mindset of, okay, we traded away Deontay Johnson. We're going to need to trade to go get someone who could line up from George Pickens. And they tried a few things and probably explored a few options. And Ayuk might have been the most realistic down the stretch, but, nothing came to fruition. So, outside of George Pickens, that room looks pretty slim right now. Hoping Van Jefferson in his, I think it's his 5th or 6th year, kind of, bounces back to his rookie form, which is sad to say. It's like, I'm not hitching my wagon to that. I wasn't a big Roman Wilson guy coming out of the draft. It's not that he's not talented, but, kind of a one-trick pony type, which I didn't think we would go for. And then, just some other guys, Calvin Austin, who you hope can maybe step up, but just overall not how I thought the wide receiver room was going to look just really heading into the year, because any injury to Pickens, boy, I don't know who we throw to. After that.
Something just to tack onto that. None of us were really huge fans of the Wilson pick. It kind of was what it was. But Jalen McMillan starting for the Bucs. He's playing inside and out. He had a really good camp, really good preseason. Luke McCaffrey is a lot closer to playing with the Commanders than Roman Wilson is for the Steelers, and both those guys had inside-out flexibility, which Roman Wilson doesn't.
Javon Baker. A little off the field issue this week, but on the field, he's expected to start for them and maybe be their number one guy.
Which we were banging the drum for Javon Baker for forever. Troy Franklin, even I think he's starting for the Broncos right now. So you don't make draft picks for their rookie year, but kind of question if Roman Wilson couldn't really push Van Jefferson. Here's in all honesty, we're going to tell, because Calvin Austin's pretty injury prone, and he's starting right now, and it's going to be Scotty Miller fills the same role as Roman Wilson. So if Scotty Miller's getting those reps before Roman Wilson, that's going to tell us a whole lot.
And I think the thing you'll see is Van Jefferson, when he's aligned inside or as the inside receiver on a tube side or whatever, I think he's a lot more effective as a sort of the equivalent of the big slot, even though he's not that big. And he's a good blocker or whatever, that's great. But I think if he has to live as an outside receiver, essentially on the X side where he's playing up at the line of scrimmage, I'm not sure he's going to show you. I'm not sure he's going to show you a lot more than the last couple of guys that they've had that were these sort of veteran wide receiver types that have come through the Steelers. And it's just kind of like, it's a very, I don't know, these guys, both Van Jefferson and I would say Roman Wilson falls into the same boat, are guys that you scheme plays for, who have athletic ability and can make plays. But the way the Steelers have traditionally operated in the passing game, and I'm not really convinced that Arthur Smith is that much different, the way that the Steelers have traditionally operated is, they want guys to kind of have the matchup, to win their matchup and make plays that way. And that's the piece I feel like they're missing. George Pickens, not necessarily going to win a bunch of matchups, but he's going to win a bunch of battles for the ball. But they kind of need that, couple of route guys to really threaten defenses to open things up.
Yeah, kind of with closing out the wide receiver discussion, moving to kind of a few other areas real quick. I'm kind of concerned about depth for multiple positions across this roster. Where the starting group doesn't look bad, but boy, afterwards you start to really question, because I take a look at cornerback, Joey Porter, very good rookie year, Dante Jackson, reliable pro. But boy, after that, you're counting on Darius Rush, Corey Trice Jr. coming off his ACL tear, who don't get me wrong, looked promising in camp and preseason, but it's like, that's just both of those guys are just second year guys. Beanie Bishop in the slot. I think he's not the first undrafted free agent rookie to make in a while, because Warren did, but a lot of trust, so to say. He's our starting nickel cornerback right now, and we don't really have a lot of guys behind him who can do that. There was some talk of I think it was Deshaun Elliott, coming down and playing some big nickel situations, coming down and doing that. But boy, you get an injury to one of the outside corners, you really start to worry there, in my opinion. Another spot's outside linebacker. I think there's only really 3 on the roster right now. Outside of Watt and Highsmith, and then, last year's rookie Nick Herbig, that's it. They thought they were going to re-sign Marcus Golden, and Golden was like, yeah, no, I'm good. Peace. I'm done. Defensively, while we look good on paper, I'm a little concerned about, our depth there as compared to our depth at inside linebacker, which is better, not great, but better. And then it kind of seems like we have a lot of good players on the defensive line in theory, but they have to be able to step up and play. We all saw what happened when Hayward went down last year. and it felt like we kind of had a revolving door of defensive players trying to replace him. So it'll just be interesting to see how this team holds up in the long haul. As far as injuries go, we all know how quickly injuries can derail a season. But and funny thing, Korey, did you say earlier that we are the second oldest team in the NFL?
Yep, and
well, we are gotta all be on the defensive side of the ball because I didn't think there was
the quarterback. The quarterback is also old.
Okay, I was about to say, like on offense, I was literally trying to think like I don't know anyone over like 26, but I guess Van Jefferson and Russell Wilson.
Daniels.
So, but just an interesting roster that this team has put together.
Right? It's a roster built on hope, which is like if it's sort of like if everybody stays healthy, they're a mediocre team because they don't really have the roster to overcome the fact that they don't have great coaching. I mean, they have globally coaching. The head coach seems to be very good at like pulling the guys together and getting the most out of them as sort of effort and whatever, right? But they don't really have scheming coaching. That's the kind of thing to like take a group of good try hard players, with good attitudes and energy and turn them into a unit, more like sort of what Belichick's thing is, or one of those offensive gurus, what they do with teams, their offenses. But since they don't have that, if they stay totally healthy, they're right around that 500 mark. But if they have injuries at places where they don't have that much depth, that's the recipe for a long season. It's kind of like I think all it would really take at this point is losing TJ Watt for a long period like they did last year, right?
You lose Pickens, you have zero vertical threat. Zero.
Yeah, as I'm saying, it's like you lose Pickens, you lose Watt. It's there's
think of if you lose Benton, what happens to the pass rush on the D line?
Yeah, you're relying.
It's just
on
like they're some positions they're super thin. Other positions they don't really have anybody at the top. We were talking about that they needed a slot corner, a nickel corner. We were talking about that for months before they even got to in the draft season, and not one pundit was ever talking about slot corner being an issue for the Steelers. They sound like they didn't even consider it in the first couple of rounds of the draft. After each round, we were saying, well, we really need a slot corner. We really need a slot corner, and Beanie Bishop was a very experienced college player. Basically, I think he started 6 seasons.
Yeah.
So the guy got a lot of game time in college, but it's a big ask to come in and not only be the nickel corner that starts. There's not really anybody behind him. They cut all of the slot corners that they had on the roster. So, and I really expected them to sign somebody this week, at least to kind of like shore up that position. But I'm not sure. Really, like you said, maybe they have Deshaun Elliott or Kazee, who I've been suggesting should have been their slot corner for 2 years. Maybe they're finally going to actually use him that way. I don't know, but it's a mystery to me. I came into tonight's show trying to be sort of, not all gloom and doom all the time, but I think we're just talking about realities of it. It's not to say that it all will go bad, but they're in I think at minimum, a very precarious position.
Well, Will, this is the doom and gloom podcast, man. I don't know if you've missed that the last few years, but
I'll try. I didn't, it's like I wasn't really looking forward to being another doom and gloom podcast. I'm gonna let Korey talk. He has the optimism of youth on his side.
Well, yeah. So
so is it because you've joined the working world now? Everything's gone to shit and everything's seen out.
Calvin, he's only like a year away. What's the first time he doesn't have summers off? It'll be like, oh shit, this work sucks. Yeah.
I don't know. It's the first 22 are all fine, but you still have quarterback questions.
Yeah.
I think the thing that really gets me, I'm pretty skeptical of the D-line depth period. I get Loudermilk's had a good offseason. I'm skeptical on him. Logan Lee, I thought looked horrible, if we're being frank, and he made it. Dean Lowry's, he's kind of whatever. Cam Hayward, is another year older and has lost a lot of his pass rushing prowess. He's more of a good anchor in the run game, but
we didn't even see anything from him this preseason.
No. Then Ogunjobi, we know what he is at this point. I mean, he might get you one huge game and then 3 games where you don't know he's on the field. It's gonna come down to betting a lot on the E line. What really gets me, it's an effing clown show over with the O line. That's what it is. It's a clown show, and they've been doing it for years, where they're playing out of position, they're moving them off their drafted position, and they've done it over and over and over again. And I mean, I don't know how you can take a guy like Broderick Jones in the first round where he had a lot of flaws. And none of those issues have been addressed. Not one. All the same issues he had. You can go and look at his Georgia tape and he looks the same. He's relying off of size and athleticism, which in the NFL is going to get you giving up, 5 pressures a game because these dudes are good too. He doesn't even know where he's playing this week. Tomlin won't give an answer. I like the
Is he playing this week? Because what I heard was Troy Fautanu was going to be ready for the start of the season, and he was going to start. So if that's the case, are we even sure that who's starting on the offensive line? It appears to be a state secret right now.
Yeah, we don't know who's starting at left guard. We don't know if it's McCormick. I think the rumors are that it's Anderson.
Yeah.
I think Garrett might take his lunch, if I'm being honest. But, here's at guard, I'm not even going to get too worked up because let's say Spencer Anderson goes out there and is bad. McCormick's going to slot in. I don't see Anderson being a guy they dig their heels on. I don't think the same thing will happen with Dan Moore. I think if Dan Moore goes out and plays bad, I think Dan Moore will just continue to start. He's the most immovable guy on that O-line, apparently.
Well, only immovable for the coaches, not for defensive players. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't get how our 4th round tackle is more anchored in at the most valuable spot on the line than our first rounder from, a year ago. It's just kind of beyond me at this point where I think the O-line coaching stinks. I think they've lucked into drafting a guy who's basically ready-made in Zach Frazier, who I talked up for forever. They had the trade for both of their guards. Or no, they signed one. They had the trade for one. They had the sign. Did they sign Daniels? They might have signed
both in free agency.
Yeah. They couldn't develop their own guards. They maybe fell into mediocre range with Dan Moore. I mean, I'll give them that. Then they've drafted Broderick, who hasn't developed. I mean, it's a clown show over there. And we haven't been able to do anything with the O-line since Munchak. And I think this will be what could just tank the season because there are holes on the line. And if you're looking at a first rounder like Broderick Jones as being a hole, there's something seriously wrong in your organization.
Well, again, I'm going to bring up one more player because he's not on the Steelers, but easily could have still been. We moved a promising rookie right guard over to left guard, allowed him to suck there, then sat his ass, then traded him to the Rams, and now he's a top 3 paid guard in the league because someone knew how to use him. Oh, and that man's name is Dotson, by the way, Kevin Dotson.
And we had brought that up. It's not like this was some state secret. The dude who trains him every offseason said this for at least a year. I brought this up over and over again on the podcast.
We've been talking about it for more than 3 years.
It's
100%.
It blows my mind that they see guys play in a position. Kendrick Green, who's a college guard. We moved him to center. He stunk at center. Same dude said, hey, he's a better guard than center. You guys tried to make him a center. Now he stinks. Goes to the Texans. Then he was one of the highest graded players in the NFL at guard. It's a complete clown show on the O-line, and that's what really just frustrates me.
Maybe they'll have Zach Frazier. Maybe they'll have Zach Frazier start at left guard and bring in Spencer Anderson to play center. Of course,
it would not shock me. Would not shock me.
The thing is about replacing Dan Moore. If you follow the Steelers for any length of time, their team motto is something along the lines of, how could we replace a player if it might get worse? You know what I mean? It's like they'll do anything for stability before they have to turn that oil tanker around. It's like they'll try everything they can to make it work before they make a change. You know, it's all about execution, guys. You know that.
And just one thing I want to point out too, just looking at the and I don't mean to kill the roster, but it's really just all the depth pieces that we're talking about. If Patrick Queen goes down, who's not a good coverage guy in his own right, he's good in man, horrible in zone. You're left with the Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson, Tyler Matakovich, and Mark Robinson. So the only dude who might be above the 25th percentile in zone coverage is a rookie without an ACL. Like, that's the guy you would have to go out and rely on. And then even then, we don't know if he can bang in there. And, like, he's not the biggest dude. Like, he's not a huge frame dude. When you got to cover, you got to go cover tight ends. Can he cover Mark? At least respectably, that's all what you have to do. Like,
I don't think he'll play that much, first of all, because I think they think Patrick Queen's a coverage backer. So they're going to pair him with Landon Roberts in base, and it's only if they play less dime and they replace that with more nickel, then maybe I could see it happening. But I get a feeling they go to dime and it'll be Patrick Queen in the middle of the field with the green dot. That's what it seems like they're going to do. I'm really curious. That's something about seeing the regular season will really tell the tale. And I'm with you. I think Patrick Queen covering the back, man on man, middle of the field to the sideline, great job. Having to go play in reverse, as I like to say, for linebackers is the test of truth. And it's not really, they had Roquan Smith doing that. And I'm not even sure I think Roquan Smith is suited for that, but he was apparently more suited to do that than Patrick Queen, because that's how they were using them in Baltimore, where they, could have really used that athleticism. I think that's part of why they let him go, is that they didn't really see him as a coverage backer.
I will give this to them. I don't know how aggressive they're going to be with this, but I will say Roberts, great blitzer. Queen, great blitzer.
Yep.
Wilson, great blitzer. If they want to throw Herbig out there, which they did a little bit in the preseason, great blitzer. Porter, great coverage man, great coverage in man. Dante Jackson, horrible in zone, but he can play his ass off in man. So if they come out and they want to blitz linebackers, get exotic, lots of heavy man press, they want to make that their identity, they could actually be pretty solid on the defensive end. Now, it comes back, an injury could throw that askew. If Beanie Bishop can't cover in man, you don't have anyone until Cam Sutton comes back, and even then, he was rough towards the end of last year. So you're kind of, because he's not a man guy, so you're kind of crossing your fingers that, Beanie Bishop can do it and everyone stays healthy. But the ingredients are there for a pretty good defense if they play to their strengths, which I'm not convinced they will.
I don't know. I kind of feel like teams are going to run at the Steelers, Jeremy. I don't know what your take is on this, but I feel like if I'm attacking them, I'm trying to make that defensive line prove that they can keep the linebackers clean, and to make sure that nickel cornerback can make plays in the run game physically. I'm wondering how you see that, but that's, to me, how I would attack them.
Well, I was actually about ready to say, we were talking about our linebacker group. Outside of Landon Roberts and maybe Mark Robinson, do any of those guys really have the mentality to bang against an offensive lineman all game? Because, I think if you get an offensive lineman on pretty much any of our backers, not named a Landon Roberts, you're going to get 5 yards to carry, just because of how our defensive line, has shifted from what used to be this really good 2-gapping 3-4 front to a more penetrating style of up the field attacking to, well, now we're just trying to throw athletes out there and try to do the best that we can with two great, one great edge rusher, and a good edge rusher in Highsmith. I won't go as far to call him great. He's very good. But then, having to rely on a very old Cameron Hayward, who the Steelers just extended, earlier today, a young guy in Keanu Benton who flashed more as a disruptor rather than a, block holder. by any means. Then you've got another guy like Ogunjobi that's almost exactly like that behind him, except not as good as Benton in his second year. And Ogunjobi's in his like 8th or 9th.
50th. Yeah.
Yeah, 50th. Good one. And then Loudermilk's okay. The one guy we didn't mention on the defensive line who supposedly had a great camp, kind of more off the field and bases, DeMarvin Leal. He's lost a ton of weight. He looked really athletic out there. But again, do you trust this team to really know how to use that at this point? So I agree. I mean, running at the Steelers seems to be like the logical thing to do because you neutralize the pass rush that way because they have to actually play the run at that point.
What would have made me feel a lot better, and I actually really liked him when he was coming out.
Yeah.
What Jeremiah Moon was actually, that dude's strong as an ox. So, right now you kind of run into the issue where if you want to run at TJ Watt over and over again, which, as good as TJ Watt is, he chases down a lot of backside plays, but you can run at him because he gets upfield.
I say running at him is certainly a better solution than trying to run away from him.
Yeah, he gets upfield so fast. Nick Herbig is cut from that same cloth. There's unless you put Leal out there, which then you're cutting into the D-line depth, it just feels like this roster, if you just stare at the roster itself, it just doesn't look like it's built all that well. And it's nothing against Michael Pruitt and Connor Hayward, who we all figured would make the roster. But why do we need both of those guys and we're rolling out there with 3 outside linebackers? I get injuries play a part, but you got to have something there. Like, you got to replace that.
Well, they don't really have anybody else who's proven as a pass. I mean, shouldn't say proven as a pass catcher. You've got to get very tight end centric offense, and we're trusting that Pat Freiermuth is going to take a step forward because I don't know why we're trusting that, but the thought is, he can deal with getting more touches and more banging and, more usage and not, either crumble physically or he'll be able to live up to become a better receiver, more and more threatening receiver target. But I think actually there's more chance that they will throw the ball to Michael Pruitt and Connor Hayward. I think instead of Freiermuth's numbers going up, I think he'll just have a similar season, maybe better because of play action. And I kind of expect that they need those guys. I mean, in fact, I would rather throw the ball to Michael Pruitt than most of the wide receivers on the roster. I feel or Connor Hayward for the same reason that like they're actually both somewhat exciting receivers, that threaten something. Whereas, I don't know, Scotty Miller plays hard and I think he's a pretty good player, but they really don't have a lot of action going on behind Pickens. So that's the only thing I would say about that. But yes, I'm in agreement that I think if the question is really global, the Steelers roster, they're 53 guys. Where would they stack up? Set aside coaching and Mike Tomlin's going to make them play better and we have a new offensive coordinator, blah, blah, blah. Just take the 53 guys and tell me where do they stack in 32? What roster is this talent-wise? Because it's not just about your 3 stars that you have who are great, right? Or your top 10 players that are pretty good players that you hope not to lose. It's the rest of the guys that make the roster, really, and they matter a lot in an NFL season.
And I don't,
Jeremy, where would you put the Steelers roster?
22nd at best.
I mean, I'm just gonna rattle off names of backups, and I get that like the back of your roster is not going to be like studs, but Kyle Allen, Ancient Cordarrelle Patterson, Scotty Miller, Ryan McCollum, Dean Lowry, Logan Lee, Isaiah Loudermilk, Tyler Matakovich, Jalen Elliott, Miles Killebrew. Like that's a notable amount of dudes.
That sounds like the lineup for the Jags, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like those are all guys that are probably more practice squad players on a lot of teams, and they're all on the active 53.
Listen, man, this team I've been saying this. I've been on this train for like a month or two. The Tomlin extension was a part of the offseason we didn't really talk about. But I'm looking at this roster, and it says to me, think about, they don't really have a bunch of guys signed for next year. They got a lot of guys in the last year of their contract. Like even Cameron Hayward, who signed a deal today, his deal was basically they extended him with the same amount of guaranteed money as he was scheduled to make it a week from now anyway. He would have had a guaranteed salary for the season if he plays the first game, right? So they just gave him $60 million guaranteed and added 2 years at the same sort of level. So they'll be in the same position exactly next year, where if he wants to retire, he can walk away. Nobody is the worse. If he wants to play another year, they could restructure his contract again if they wanted to get it down. Like it's just like a situation perfect for the guy's end of the career. Actually applaud the move. It looks good, sounds good that you resigned him, but it doesn't hurt you financially in the future. But neither of their top two quarterbacks is signed for next year. Right now, Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris are not signed to next year. They basically are set up perfectly for a complete rebuild next year with a new head coach. Because typically you get a new coaching staff that comes in, they bring their guys in, they a lot of these veterans that are sort of, we're accustomed to seeing over and over again are cleared out. And especially you start new regime, new quarterback, here we go. And I just feel like they're really set for that. Like it could happen. Maybe they'll do it with their head coach being the same head coach, but it feels to me like they're hedging their bets a little. They're like, hey, we're going to try out Russell Wilson, and if he plays lights out and Arthur Smith is as good as he was in Tennessee, and Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris have the best seasons of their career, and the offensive line stays together, we have a good defense, we think, and we have this stuff might happen. And if it all works out, they might be able to win a playoff game. But if it doesn't work, they don't really have a lot invested beyond this year. They can start over. And I think, if it doesn't work, you'll be in a pretty good position to start over, and you might get a quarterback, for instance.
Well, Will, you beat me to the punch on the Tomlin extension, because I was going to make a parallel to that basically being the Cameron Hayward extension, just at head coach. They basically said, well, Mike, we're going to keep you around as long as you want to be here. And, it feels like, maybe the past several years, the rumors have been out there is like, well, does Tomlin still want to do this, and all that. Don't get me wrong, he always thunders out and says, this is my job and it'll be my job, as long as I want it or whatever. And that's fine, because the Steelers sure aren't going to fire him. They're not going to go down as that organization that fires him, but they will be that organization that says, yeah, he's ready to walk away from the game for the time being. So that's exactly what I was about ready to say in parallel to the Hayward contract, that it feels like both those guys can just leave whenever they want to at this point, without the negative press of, they let, their longtime defensive captain go. They let a head coach go that's never had a losing season. I swear to God, we're still talking about that. Really thought we were going to avoid that this year, but it's there.
But hey, then they're going to turn around and trade a first-round pick to save their season, about 3 weeks in. So just be ready for that.
Oh, God. I'm not even sure if there's anyone that's even worth that this year. But anyway, we've kind of talked about the roster for a pretty long time. Let's kind of transition that over into some matchups we should watch as your Pittsburgh Steelers travel down to Atlanta to play a revenge game for new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. He gets to take on the team that just fired him. So really two supposedly new look teams, are heading down to Atlanta to try some things out. I'm going to jump in at first just because I feel like this could be the matchup that really determines everything. George Pickens versus cornerback AJ Terrell. If Terrell can shut down Pickens, it's going to be a really long day, gentlemen. Because we've alluded to it. We just don't think the passing game outside of Pickens, sprinkling a little Freiermuth, we have not seen anything that believes us to think that we could be able to pass our way and move the ball down the field consistently. This really true, if that matchup goes sour, it could truly be an Arthur Smith 3 yards in a cloud of dust from the running game. So that's kind of my first big one. Korey, I'll throw it to you next. What do you kind of think is one of the other big matchups we should be on the lookout for in week 1 here?
Yeah, that first one is whoever Grady Jarrett's on.
Yep.
Whoever going to have a real, I mean, I alluded to it earlier. If that's Spencer Anderson, that could be rough. It could, if it's Mason McCormick, it could be rough. But that's still play. The other one I'm a little concerned about is he's kind of started to come on a little bit. It's Zach Harrison. I was a fan of him in the draft. I figured length, athleticism, all that. And the reason why I'm concerned is he's kind of Greg Rousseau-ish, who we saw just put Broderick Jones on torture in that preseason game. It's the same mold where it's a really good athlete with just freaky length. And if that plays out anywhere like it did in the preseason, that could be just a terror coming off that edge. But I don't know if he'll be on that side. It's just kind of something where it's something to watch.
Gotcha. Will, do you have a particular matchup that you want to highlight?
Although I would agree that in general that the Atlanta front 7 on defense is that's not an easy matchup playing in their dome, where apparently they've sold more tickets to Atlanta fans this year because of how they did their ticket selling. So it'll be curious to see how many Steelers fans actually show up there. But I think they got, you mentioned Zach Harrison, but they got Matthew Judon on the other side, and next to Grady Jarrett, they have David Onyemata. That's a legit, front 4 and some really athletic linebackers. So I feel like it's gonna be some work for an offensive line that's playing together in this configuration for the first time, whatever it'll be. So that's a bit rough. My matchup I'll talk about is Steelers, let's call it Steelers quarterback and offense and the offensive coordinator. So Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith versus the Atlanta Falcons safeties, because Atlanta now has Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons playing safety.
And don't forget, Richie Grant's a baller.
Right. No, I love Richie Grant. Of course, I loved him coming out. He'll be their third guy, maybe play some in the slot. So, yeah, they're not very – I mean, I don't think they're particularly strong at corner, but the rest of their defense is much improved over where it was last year. And as it was last year, they had some good pieces to it. So I feel like already, the thing with Russell Wilson is the last couple of years, he's been wary about throwing the ball in the middle of the field. He doesn't really throw to tight ends much. And that to me means you're going to give the safeties some chances in this game. And those are 2 really good safeties, not to be I think you should suspect that the Steelers might have some trouble throwing the intermediate deep balls where safeties aren't looked off. So you've got to do things to scheme them out of the way with either play action or with play design. And if you're Russell Wilson, you have to work really hard to manipulate those safeties more than you might expect in a play action world. Because usually play action world is you play action, you turn around, you identify your target, you throw it. But I think it's going to evolve into more of a situation where you got to turn around and make sure you're manipulating that safety before you let go of the ball.
Yeah, conversely, I'd say, on the other side of the ball, I think Pittsburgh's going to have the exact same issue covering a guy like Kyle Pitts. How many years for the last decade now have we been saying our linebackers can't cover anyone? We just talked about how we're not confident in any of our linebackers really in coverage. And now they're going up against one of the most physically and athletically talented tight ends in the league in Kyle Pitts, who, according to Kirk Cousins, is going to be getting a lot of balls this year. So just with him matched up on any of those guys in the middle, it might be more on our safeties, Deshaun Elliott, Minkah Fitzpatrick maybe coming down and helping limit at least the over the top stuff so that we don't get burned in the middle like we have so many times in the past. I still go to bed with nightmares sometimes. The tight end's just running right up the middle and our guys running to try to keep up, but that's about it. And then I thought you made a good point with just the defensive front seven. The literal words I wrote down on my board about their front seven. Very athletic, high effort guys. They are guys that are all still trying to prove something. One, Judon wants a big new contract, so and that's why he's not in New England. You got a bunch of young, hungry linebackers, that are only like in years 2 and years 3. And they have an first or a first rounder that we didn't even mention, and I think it's Arnold Edebakadi, who's going to be rotating in at defensive end too. So just with an offensive line that's banged up, we don't even know which tackle starting at right tackle. It just seems like a week where we're going to look pretty bad.
I just figure you have a new offensive coordinator, a new playbook, a bunch of turnover on the offensive line, a bunch of rookies on the offensive line, and a very sketchy wide receiver situation with a quarterback or quarterbacks, if you want to include Justin Fields in this, that didn't have the most success the last couple of years. That just feels like a recipe to, at the minimum, slow start. Whether they get it together eventually and figure out a formula that works with that defense, could be, but it definitely screams slow. And the Steelers have always started off slowly the season. They've hit their stride around the bye week almost every year. They have up and down, and then they get it together, and you're surprised they go on a run at the end of the season. That is a formula that's worked for never having had a losing season, but that's a pretty bad formula when the last 8 games of the season, not just the opponents, but also the schedule, the way the schedule lays out is just, it's ugly, man. They need some early wins. They put the early wins in the bank if they want to find their way back to the playoffs.
And just to point out something, we're looking at a linebacking core that we're playing. We're going to run outside zone. That is the one guarantee you're getting with an Arthur Smith offense. Arnold Ebiketis, 250 pounds, ran a 4.6. Troy Anderson, 245 pounds, ran a 4.4. Even Caden Ellis, who's known as this tackle monster, ran a 4.61 at 240. All these dudes are big and all of them can run. These aren't guys that you're just going to be able to either outrun to the edge or they get caught up in the O-line's tracks and you're just going to get destroyed. These guys you're going to have to move them. You're going to have to beat them to spots. And when we're talking about those safeties and how we only have one dude and, AJ Terrell's a dude on the other end, it just feels like it might be some tough sledding for the offense.
Oh, and then not to mention the last kind of matchup I kind of wrote on my board, and I didn't have any players specific for against this Atlanta player, but for the love of God, you have to tackle Bijan Robinson. The dude is a freight train. There's a reason he was taken 7th overall. So I don't care if it's Patrick Queen or Landon Roberts, safeties coming down, nickel corners, whoever it is. You have to get that man on the ground or it's going to be a very, very long day with just how talented he is, the way he moves, the way he is built. I am definitely scared of how we look in game 1 against probably, a top 3 talented running back in this league right now with not a lot of tread either. So,
not to mention that his backup is 1,000-yard rusher and his back 1,000-yard 125-pound rusher who, as much as it pissed off fantasy owners that Tyler Algier played over Bijan at points, he got the job done. He's a good back in his own right. I don't know if this is this hot of a take, but he's at least where Najee is, and that's our starter. We obviously have our views on Jalen Warren being better, who still hasn't taken the job somehow, which I was concerned about because Jalen Warren is not a good outside zone runner.
Yeah.
But, that's when Bijan gets tired, it's not like you've got some random dude coming in. That's just 1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah. Well, listen, here's the other thing. Love him or hate him, they added Kirk Cousins to this offense, right?
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the quarterback.
And you have the year they came out, the top running back in the draft, the top wide receiver. I think Drake London was the top wide receiver that year, or he was close.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Kyle Pitts, who was the top tight end. So you literally have, high pedigree targets, and now you have a quarterback that theoretically can get the ball to them. I would, if I were betting, looking at just the rosters and ignoring everything else, I would guess that Atlanta finishes better than Pittsburgh when the season is over. So you're going in your first week where you're expecting the Steelers to start slowly for a variety of reasons, and they're going against a team with some new energy because they got a new quarterback that's still in his prime, more or less. And these targets are all hungry because they've not really been able to get the ball the way that they expected to when they came in the league. I don't want to be all negative about the week, but that doesn't make me optimistic.
And if there's one thing about Kirk Cousins, one thing he does, he gets the ball to his dudes. That's the one thing he does is he does not mess around. He's not going to be throwing a ton of balls to Darnell Mooney. He's not going to be peppering them into Ray McLeod. That football is going to go to Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and Drake London.
On the one counterpoint, just because I was going to bring this up here, and then you kind of poo-pooed it with that last statement. I actually think Darnell Mooney's in for a huge year. I think people forgot how good he was early in his career, and then had to deal with our backup quarterback, Justin Fields, for like several years. He actually had 1,000-yard season, was actually pretty dang good early in his career, but then went to, a Justin Fields led offense where he doesn't get the ball out quick. He doesn't know how to read through progressions and go to the deep man. So I actually think Darnell Mooney is going to be an unsung hero for Atlanta this year. I've thought that ever since he signed there in the offseason for pretty good money, actually. I think he's getting paid like $7 million a year or something for a guy who hasn't put up numbers in 2 years. So I wrote it down in the beginning of the offseason as like Darnell Mooney bounce back here. So
now, pretty much getting every matchup, but I do, it's hard to, look at the matchup without this. I will say they don't have many quick winning man guys, and Caleb McGarry's probably going to get tore up by TJ Watt.
Yeah.
So that is a positive where Kirk Cousins is not mobile. Caleb McGarry's probably going to get smoked. So either they're going to be forced to leave their back in protection, throw a tight end who's not Kyle Pitts out there to help, or something. But that is something where it's going to be heavily slanted in our way, where TJ Watt's going to kill Caleb McGarry.
Yeah, remind me again, guys, because I'm blanking on it. But Kirk Cousins' injury, wasn't that an Achilles or something?
Yeah, something mobility-wise, yeah.
Yeah, so, he might not quite be as mobile as he used to be either. So
yeah.
He couldn't move before either, so.
Yeah, and then
Korey, I'm a little surprised Storm Norton didn't win that job over McGarry, because I think Storm Norton's actually a serviceable right tackle in the league.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that shifts at some point.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's an issue. That's and TJ Watt's going to come in fresh and with a lot of,
a lot of
hit people. So that's definitely something in the Steelers' defense's favor.
Well, and believe it or not, guys, that there are other games happening around the league.
And shut the.
I know what. And probably the biggest one is our NFL kickoff this year too. Baltimore is heading to Kansas City. Kansas City is favored by 3 at home. Will, let's start with you. How do you think this game is going to go? What's your prediction here on the spread?
Well, I'm torn because on one hand, the Ravens, I think, lost a bit. They're sort of reloaded, not necessarily for the better. They lose like a couple of offensive linemen and a pass rusher, and that's not nothing, right? On the other hand, I just feel like the Chiefs, it's got to be so hard to like go on 2 Super Bowl runs and lay it all to waste and hold a trophy at the end of the year and have to get it up for week 1, on Thursday night. Like, like it's like, okay, man, it's a long season and like you can't burn ourselves out for week 1. So I'm a little, it's an opportunity for the Ravens to steal a win against Kansas City. So I guess it wouldn't shock me. What's the line, did you say?
Just 3 for Kansas City.
Yeah. I kind of feel like it's a close game, but it might be the Chiefs by 3. I like what Kansas City did. I worry a little bit that they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but I think that bothers you less against a team like Baltimore that isn't super wide receiver heavy. But Sneed was also the guy I think that covered move tight ends. He was like their piece that they could throw out there. Their formula was Chris Jones wreaks havoc, in the backfield, and L'Jarius Sneed jumps on their best guy. And they moved to that, another corner last year who also, covered some people like that. So I think they'll miss Sneed a little bit. It might take them a little while to get around to it, but Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes, and they're playing at home. I'll take the Chiefs in a close one.
Okay, so win by 3 then?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Korey?
I'll tell you what, I really like what that Ravens offense kind of looks like, because, I mean, you're telling me that they can roll out there and they can go Lamar, Patrick Ricard, Derrick Henry, with Zay Flowers split out, Mark Andrews on the line, Isaiah Likely flexed at the wing, and they're in 22 personnel with 1 receiver. And then they've got as big of an O-line as they've got, and then they've got Linderbaum, who is automatic. I mean, you can do a whole lot of stuff out of that base formation. Like, you guys know they have Daniel Faeli starting at right guard.
Yeah.
380. They've got Andrew Voorhees starting at left guard, 6'6", 320.
Okay, so those 3 guys, Lindenbaum, Voorhees, and Faeli, no match for Chris Jones. You watch. Chris Jones is gonna destroy the interior of that offensive line because he's just that guy.
Chris Jones is a dude, but then Chris Jones might have to come through a wham block. Chris Jones has to go through Patrick Ricard. Chris Jones has to wrap up Derrick Henry in the backfield. They're just so big that even if, and then you still got to worry about Lamar scrambling, that's always a threat. So they're just so big that they're just going to beat the hell out of all the teams that they play on the interior. They're going to run the ball. Then you got to worry about Lamar outrunning you to the outside. Then if you don't have a dude who matches up with Zay Flowers, he's going to kill you in man. He knows how to find the soft spots in zone. Mark Andrews is still a mismatch for anyone. Isaiah Likely is still a mismatch for anyone. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff on offense, but then the defense is just good. You look at the defense, it's just a good defense. Yeah. So I think the Chiefs will be hurt by losing Sneed. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Brian Cooks are starting free safety. Justin Reeves are starting strong safety. Both fine players, but I don't think Shamari Connors are starting slot. I don't think that's just a huge drop off, and I don't think they really have the guy to go chase tight ends around like Sneed did. McDuffie's a stud, but you can't put McDuffie in the slot for a Ravens game. I don't know who if I'm the Chiefs, I'm rolling out there and Leo Chenal, who's their third backer, doesn't leave the field, because you're going to need a dude with size to come down and just bang. And Nick Bolton is undersized. Drew Tranquill's not that kind of backer. Chenal, I think, is going to have to be leaned on. I actually really like Jack Cochran when he was coming out. I don't know how much he's going to play.
Me too. Yeah.
But I think it's just going to be way too physical of a game for the Chiefs defense without having Sneed to just kind of cover up and patch up the slot work on Zay Jones, match up with Likely when he needs him to. I think they're going to have an adjustment period this game. And I think the Ravens just beat the tar out of them running the ball, and then they just set up their big plays. So I still think it's close. Patrick Mahomes is going to get his. I'm going to say 24-17 Ravens, but I think it's just one of those ones where everyone's kind of asking, can the Chiefs repeat? And they'll figure it out. Spags is a good DC, but the Ravens are scary. That's just kind of bottom line.
Gotcha. I think there's someone that we haven't brought up in this matchup yet, which I think is kind of a telltale sign on whether Kansas City is going to win or not. We don't know if their new co-offensive coordinator, Taylor Swift, is going to be in the box or not. So that's the last thing I'm going to say about that. Just want to throw that in there. But I like the Chiefs this week only because I still don't believe in Lamar Jackson to throw the ball when he needs to, when he's got to find or fit it in a tight window. Maybe there aren't as many tight windows as there were in the past against this team, but I'm still not sold on Derrick Henry in this offense. I understand Gus Edwards is really good in this offense, but even then, his efficiency numbers weren't great. I'm actually not that sold on the Ravens' interior offensive linemen. They're big dudes, don't get me wrong, but I feel like, their strength and power is about the only thing they do. That they're not that athletic outside of Linderbaum. Linderbaum's a freak. He's a freak. Don't get me wrong. More talking about Voorhees and Falale. Those two guys are mountains. That they're stationary targets as far as what they do on the offensive line. So I will give the Chiefs the margin opening up at home. It's a big game. Winning. Coming off your second Super Bowl win in 2 years. A lot of expectations. And, the refs. The refs are always in the pocket, too. So we'll just I joke. But I just think Kansas City has a good chance to win it.
Fun fact, just something to watch. Kingsley Suamataia is starting at left tackle for them. Which I think,
I didn't know that. And
some people were big fans.
Yeah, I think he's I think that's interesting. I'll say that much. I think that is interesting.
It'll be fun to see how he does out there because I think all three of us were pretty high on him. So that takes us to our first ever Friday night NFL game. That the Green Bay Packers are traveling to Philadelphia. Oh, no, wait. They're going south all the way down to South America to play a game where neither team was allowed to wear their green uniforms. Just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my life. Anyway, Philadelphia is favored by 3 on the road, which is, as this is the first international game for the NFL slate this year. So, Korey, I'll let you start off with this. How do you think this game will
go? The thing I'm pretty curious to see, and there's been buzz about it, but Jalen Hurts might not be able to call protections at the line. And Jason Kelce, apparently, that was all him. Like, he used to wave Jalen Hurts off. He did everything. And Cam Jurgens is solid. But I just noticed this. Mekhi Becton's starting at right guard for them?
Oh, my God, really? I did not know that.
Yeah. Frightening. That's really frightening. But anyways, the Eagles look stacked. I'll give them that. But I don't know. I'm kind of sipping the Jordan Love and Packers offense Kool-Aid. I think they just have so many dudes to throw at you on the outside. I mean, when your 4th and 5th receivers are Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton, you've got some dudes there. I think I'm a little skeptical. I like Barkley a lot. I mean, but he's got to stay healthy throughout the course of the year. But I don't know how I feel about the Eagles defense. They were really disappointing last year, and I'm not really sure I'm buying, that the safeties they have are going to do what they need them to do. Now, this is the team that drafted Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and they could get creative and start throwing dudes around. But I think just for week 1, I think the Packers are basically returning every starter. The Eagles have a lot of turnover. I think I'm just going to go with the Packers just because they've got the more, they're basically returning the same team. I don't even know who's really stepping in looking at this. So I'm going to go Packers in a narrow one. I'm going to go 21-24 Packers. Or 24-21.
Will, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think a marquee running back, like the kind of guy who's picked in the top 10 of the draft, let's say, or even a first-round running back, screws with the mind of teams, and it tends to actually hurt the overall effectiveness of your offense because you feel the need to to give the guy touches and to feed him the football. It's opposed to just doing whatever you need to do to win when you're not worried about whose mouth you're feeding. And I think that'll be an adjustment with Barkley. I just feel like he's a great player. And if you put him on a team where he was like the fifth option, he would be unbelievable. But I feel like they're going to want to run the offense through him, which I think is a mistake in the modern NFL anyway. And on paper, like, you hear the names, the Eagles versus the Packers. Yeah, it sounds like the Eagles, should be favored to win that game and should win. But I sort of agree with Korey, just from the standpoint of early season, that I expect the Packers to have it a little bit more together. And I'm not sure Jordan Love enjoys the same success he had last year. That's like teams have tape on him now and all that business. But yeah, I don't think everything is super kosher in Philly. So I'll take the Packers. I like that kind of a score, like a mid-scoring game, a 23-20, a 24-21, something like that.
Well, it's always boring when we agree, but in this happenstance, we just have to. I'm a big Jordan Love fan. I think he did a phenomenal job last year doing what was asked out of him. And now that he's got a full year under his belt of starting, had the downs to begin the seasons, the ascension towards the end of last year, I think that momentum just carries over. And, the Packers just have all of these weapons that they can throw it to. And Korey said this, the Eagles defense was not good last year. So if I think the Packers offensive line can win against the Eagles, very athletic and disruptive front, I think they've got a really good chance to win this game. I think it happens. It'll be really interesting with this being, an international game. No team really has a crowd edge by any means. So I'll take the Packers to cover and win on this one, but I do think it'll be close because I do think the Eagles offense will look more like it has in the past. It can't, if it looks like it does last year, this game won't even be close, but if it kind of returns to the 2022 realm of good, with AJ Brown just getting a big extension, Devonta Smith getting a big extension, a healthy Dallas Goedert, a Saquon Barkley now sprinkled into that offense, that could be a lot of firepower to stop. So close, but I like the Packers in this one too. Another anticipated matchup, Dallas is heading to Cleveland. This is a real fun matchup. I'll take the start with this. Cleveland is favored by 2.5 here. I do like Cleveland here. I'm still waiting to kind of see Dallas and how they're going to look with two rookies starting. They're starting Guyton at left tackle, who had a good preseason, but not a lot was asked out of a lot of anyone in the preseason this year. They moved Tyler Smith into left guard. Now I'm forgetting the other rookie. Oh, Cooper Bebe, a guy who we all liked at guard, is now starting at center. So I want to kind of wait and see on how the Dallas offensive line is going to look, and they've got a pretty tough test in week 1 versus a very good Cleveland defense. So I like Cleveland here, even with how bad Deshaun Watson may or could be or whatever. I don't think he's very good anymore, but I think Cleveland does just enough to outlast this team. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I like Cleveland to win and cover here. Let's go to Will, you next here.
I think Dallas is a team that's built to beat teams who pass the ball against them. Like they got this, bring guys from everywhere, a lot of speed on defense. But what do you do to teams like that? You run the ball at them. Is Nick Chubb healthy? I don't know. Is he?
He's not going to play. No.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What is their? Actually, that's a really good question that I don't know the answer to, and that is, I know they lost the other running back they had as well, right? So they're
Jerome Ford.
Oh yeah, Jerome. That's what I say. The kid from Cincinnati, and then Pierre Strong, right? Donta Foreman. They still have enough.
Mm-hmm.
But do they have enough to cover too? Yeah, Dallas just seems like I don't love the idea of Dallas on the road while they're trying to get it together and build a confidence that they're actually good, for themselves. I'm not sure they believe it on offense really. So I think the Browns may end up better this year than they've looked for a couple of years. But I would, I feel a lot more confident about this game with Nick Chubb. but I guess we're a ways away from that. So
at least 4 games.
I'll take the Browns. I'll take the Browns in a very close game. How about that?
Yeah, Korey.
Yeah, Dallas's roster has its flaws. Yeah, like defensively, especially at linebacker, they're really kind of all over the place. But until I know Deshaun Watson's better than like the 20th best quarterback in the NFL, especially without Nick Chubb, I don't know if I can go with them. It's Jerome Ford's a good back. I think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit. Obviously, Myles Garrett's a stud, but you've got a dude on the other side with Parsons. And I think Dallas will probably, with their 2 tackles, they've got 2 mountains at tackle. Terrence Steele's phenomenal. And Tyler Guyton, he's a rookie. And that's who Garrett will be on. But Tyler Guyton, you'd have a lot easier time with a guy like Myles Garrett than like a TJ Watt, just kind of matchup wise. It's still going to be tough, but it's kind of more built for that kind of matchup. I think Dak's just better than Watson. I think Dak Prescott's just better than Watson. I think they'll figure out the run game enough. Dallas can always run the ball, especially you look at their line. Smith is a mauler, Beebe's a mauler, Zach Martin's a mauler, Steele's a mauler, then Guyton played at Oklahoma, so you don't really know that much, but he's a big dude and he's physical. So I think they'll figure out ways to run the ball. I think CD's gonna, he's one of the best receivers in the game. I think Dallas wins this one, but I'm not real confident on it. I'm gonna say 20-10, but if it was flipped to 20-10, the Browns, I wouldn't really be that shocked.
Yeah. It's funny, it's like, who's going to run the ball in Dallas? It's Rico Dowdle and then Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook. If we would have been talking about Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook 5 years ago, we'd have been like, oh, this team's definitely winning this game. But 5 years later, they're both very different players. So it'll be fun.
He wasn't that awful towards the end of last year. I don't know if he'll be good this year, but he really wasn't that bad. Cook's horrible. I'm telling you, I watched Cook last year. He's dapped.
Yeah.
But Zeke actually was pretty solid last year. I wouldn't have guessed it.
Yeah.
Towards the end of last year.
Gotcha. We'll do one more before a 5-star matchup, I guess. Kind of one more big one, in my opinion, because it's 2 teams that were in the playoff last year and probably one game. They were both 1 game out from going to the Super Bowl. The Rams are heading to Detroit. Detroit's favored by 3.5 at home. Funny enough, it's another. I don't know if you call it a revenge game anymore, because both of these guys have said, they love the places they were in and were. But it's another Matt Stafford heading back to Detroit to take on former Rams quarterback Jared Goff. So always kind of a fun little storyline there. But Detroit's favored by 3.5. Korey, I'll let you jump on this one first.
This is probably the toughest game, I think. With the Browns game, it's just kind of I know who I like more, but Deshaun Watson could just show up and be Deshaun Watson again. And off the field issues aside, when he's at his A game, he's a good quarterback. And this is the dude who was up like 30 on the Chiefs in his second year or whatever. In terms of this matchup, it's tough. Yeah, I feel like this one's really a coin flip. I'm gonna lean the Rams. It's kind of a gut feeling. I like McVay. I don't really know. It's tough. They're kind of, the old line should be a little better. Steve Avila's got another year. You've got dudes at receiver, that. I think the Lions might just be, they might be better throughout the year, but I think, game 1, I think McVay's probably got a lot more cooked up than what, I don't know though. The Lions are tough.
You are required to pick a winner.
He's going to explode any second.
I'll go 24-23 Rams, but no confidence in it. None.
Okay. Will, you want to jump next?
I think you're right that this game is a coin flip kind of a game, but to me it hinges on a central theme that I think you'll find in NFL history works pretty well. And that is, it's a hell of a lot easier to be the underdog and, the prove it team that can prove that they can hang with the big boys and take down, Kansas Cities of the world, to prove yourself, etc. It's a lot harder to be the team that everybody's shooting at. So, like, if Detroit were playing San Francisco, I give them a pretty good chance to win week 1. Detroit being the favorite playing at home against the Rams, I think the Rams are set to remind them that they're pretty, they won the Super Bowl not too long ago, and that they still have tools. And it's like I feel like the Rams 27-24 in this game, and it's just, I think that Detroit facing expectations is the real opponent. Compared to, yes, the Rams are good and whatever, but it's the Rams' own pressure, self-imposed pressure of their expectations for the season that I think are going to make it rough for them.
Well, that's not how I anticipated that going. We're all going to agree on the Rams here because the Rams were kind of my surprise team down the stretch last year. I said it heading into the playoffs. This is a team that no one wants to play. And it's because their offense, they just have so many weapons. They get Cooper Kupp, fully healthy down the stretch last year. Puka Nacua, who I know dealt with a little bit of a knee injury in this preseason, but they act like he's going to be perfectly fine. Kyron Williams was a nice player for them. Drafted a good backup in Blake Corum. Signed Colby Parkinson to take over for I can't remember that tight end's name. Higbee. That they helped solidify an offensive line from the year prior to last, which was not good, as to where it was a young group that came together last year, with Dotson, Kevin Dotson going over and playing well as well. So I like the Rams here. I think their defense is also very good and underrated. I know they lost Aaron Donald, so there's a lot to replace there. Obviously, a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever, that time comes. But they drafted Jared Verse and Braden Fisk off a very good Florida State defense. Just ask Florida State how instrumental those two were, as Florida State has epically dropped 2 games to start the year. But I think there's a chance that the defense could even be even better than it was last year because people won't know how to play Fisk and Verse quite yet just because they are rookies. But they could be deeper there. They did trade away their leading tackler in Ernest Jones, though, to the Titans because of a contract dispute. They didn't feel like they were going to get anywhere with there. So whoever tackles, the running backs in this game are going to be the guys that win. So because there's talented backs on both sides. I'm going to go with the Rams, even though, it's been a lot of fun to root for Detroit and see them kind of return back to a level of, acceptable football and prominence. I think Jameson Williams could actually be really good this year if he just stays healthy. So I think this will be a shootout. I don't think either team's really going to play much defense. I think it could be a little sloppy on the defensive side of the ball this week. So I'm going to go with the Rams 30-24. Close game, but just someone pulls out a tight end or a touchdown at the end. So
before we just quickly before the season starts, Final Four in the NFC. If I say it's the Rams, the Packers, Detroit, and San Francisco, who says no?
Well, I mean that. Are we just talking about a top 4 in general, or just
who will be the last 4 standing?
Oh,
the only reason I asked that is the Packers and they share divisions, they're in the same division. So,
what was it? Packers, Lions, Niners, and who else?
The Rams.
Yeah, who stands on top at the end?
Else that could be dead on. Who would if you had to pick, Jeremy, who's not in that 4, who's your surprise team? You could see sneaking in?
Well, I don't see him sneaking in because I see them winning the division, but no one's talking about Tampa Bay. But I think Tampa Bay is going to be a fine football team. I don't think they're going to be great by any means, but they re-signed Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans is the epitome of reliable, 10 straight years of 1,000 yards, and I think almost double-digit touchdowns every year. I could be wrong on that one. They got a better running back than Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, potentially, so they at least have a guy that can come in and actually spell him. Cade Otton is going to be one of the more unheard of tight ends who was going to show up this year, and people are going to be like, who the hell's Cade Otton? Their offensive line's undoubtedly going to get better, just more years there. I think their defense is going to be about the same. They're going to give up some things, but that's still a very good team in a division where not many teams are going to challenge them. I think Atlanta is the only one. I really see the Saints kind of fading off here. They just keep trying to patch stuff together offensively with Carr and Kamara and whoever they can find to play. But
you're imagining a scenario where Green Bay or Detroit goes to Tampa Bay and loses a playoff game. That's the part that's hard for me.
No, I'm not saying they will lose that game, but I mean, we're talking about how other teams are at least going to challenge them. I mean, Tampa Bay was, 2 or 3 plays away from beating Detroit last year. So, I mean, I can see them doing that.
What's a funky team for me, which if it all kind of falls right, they would need, to be lucky injury wise because they're not a deep team. But if Kyler stays healthy, has one of his years, Marvin Harrison meets expectations, Trey McBride's supposed to be one of the top tight ends. You've got Jonah Williams and Paris Johnson anchoring a tackle.
Yep.
Trey Benson backing up, James Conner. You've got some dynamic dudes on that Cardinals offense. That could be, and then they've got, DC for a head coach who's one of the better minds. That could be a team where if they're clicking, if Kyler has a year that he could have, if he has a 90th percentile year, that could be a team that no one wants to see.
They're a good sneaky pick.
Yeah. For a sneaky pick that I don't think anyone will want to play late in the year. I'm not saying that they will get to the playoffs, but I think the Commanders could actually be a really tough out towards the end of the year if Jaden Daniels finds his stride.
Yeah.
But
by the way, don't try to do this exercise in the AFC because we spent the whole hour talking about that.
That would just be an hour.
I think the AFC is like, I'm not sure.
Possible.
Yeah, it's definitely like anything could happen.
You can look at every rattle through. Bills probably top 4. Dolphins probably top 4. Patriots should suck. Jets, if they hit their stride, that could be
Big
a really
defense and Aaron Rodgers.
Broncos iffy. Chiefs top 4. Raiders iffy. Chargers could be top 4. Ravens could be top 4. Bengals could be top 4. Browns, if it clicks, could be top 4. Steelers, iffy.
If everything they hit the lottery, yeah.
And then even the AFC South, Titans, they're going to be in the hunt.
I think the Titans are my surprise team. I believe they're going to be better than expectations. So maybe not win the division because got Houston in there, but
Jags, they've got Lawrence, they've got pieces. Colts, if it clicks, same thing as the Cardinals. If Richardson clicks, that's a scary team. And then you got the Texans. I mean, the AFC's got, if you really look at it, the Raiders you write off, the Patriots you write off, and that's about it. Everyone else is in the mix.
Yeah, it's Will, building off your thing with the Titans real quick, because it's kind of funny how this lined up today. So down in Evansville, my hometown, my dad is a part of this group called the Quarterback Club. And for the last 20 years, the voice of the Titans, Mike Keith, has always come up and met with them. And he's met with them earlier this year because Callahan does his interviews on Monday. So it kind of vaulted him up much earlier into the year than whatnot. And he said that, they expect a huge step from Will Levis this year, and that they truly do think they will be the surprise team as long as their depth at defensive line and corner doesn't expose them. They truly feel like they are going to take the next step.
Offensively, they have a brilliant head coach who's a brilliant offensive coordinator, and they have the best offensive line coach in the league. Happens to be related to him that came in the deal. And that right there is like the first time that Will Levis in his entire life as a quarterback has been on a team that was offensive oriented in terms of the head coach. And had an offensive plan that was something other than hand off, and make a play. So that to me is a really good formula for success to find. Got a quarterback who's got tools, and you're finally going to give him a chance to like throw on first down and do stuff that other quarterbacks get to do. Just nice. Like, good for them.
Just to point out something, the AFC South is always considered like the lame division in the AFC, and I would take the Colts, the Jags, the Texans rosters 10 times out of 10 over the Steelers. I don't know how it's going to wind up at the end, but
well, yeah, you want to know why? It's because they all believe in their quarterback.
Yeah, well, that's what gives you hope. That's why every year that Ben Roethlisberger suited up for the Steelers, you had at least a little bit of hope that you could win the Super Bowl. Even if everything else was exactly the same with this team, but you had a guy like that playing quarterback, you would be like, all right, let's ride, let's roll and see what happens.
Mentioning the word hope, let's move that word into our 5-star matchup of the week. When the Pittsburgh Steelers travel south to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. The Falcons are favored by 3 at the moment. I will take the first bullet this year. I do not think we cover, and I think we lose. I just think it's going to be an ugly week 1 with how banged up our offensive line is, with not knowing who we're throwing at right tackle, with not who we're going to throw the ball to other than Freiermuth and Pickens. I think I'm confident that Harrison Warren can run the ball. We've seen it. How it works in this new offense with the outside zone still up for debate, but it just feels like this is kind of Atlanta's year with them kind of retooling their defense. Slightly more capable pieces on offense, new head coach, everything just kind of feels like it's the Dirty Birds' turn to kind of turn their season fortunes around. So I'm going to go, it's going to be the Falcons, I think like 24-13. Korey, I'll throw it to you next.
I'm going to work out the score in my head while I talk, but I think we lose.
That wouldn't be the first time one of us has done that.
Yeah. Yeah, we just talking like, oh God, how do I do this this time? Oh yeah.
Well, because I had a good score in my head, and then I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. I think they're going to come out with a lot of juice. New head coach, new quarterback. Raheem Morris is kind of Tomlin-y, where he's going to get his troops fired up. Now, that's what he's going to do. And you got Kirk Cousins. They got a good OC. They got a young back who's ready to be unchained. It just feels like they're going to be a bit more confident in themselves than the Steelers will be. And even with TJ Watt tearing up a right tackle, that can only do so much for so long. I'm really concerned about, as good as Pickens is, I love Pickens. AJ Terrell is pretty well suited to match up with him. Like, that's not going to be a go out and whoop his ass. AJ Terrell's going to give him everything he wants. And they've got the backers to run with Pat. I mean, Pat's not like this 4-4 dude. He's find the soft spots, and Anderson can move with him. Even Ellis can move with him. So I'm just skeptical of how we're going to move the ball, if I'm being honest. I think their front seven's tough. And we have a question at guard. We have a question at tackle. It just feels like we're traditionally slow starters. This is all the makings of a loss. I was going to say 14-13, but I was just kind of thinking about it last second. I feel like it might be worse. I'm going to say 21-10 is my guess. I just think it's going to be hard to move the ball.
Yeah, we'll throw it to you last year.
I thought when you mentioned hope as a segue, I thought you were going to suggest that each of us had to incorporate the word hope into our prediction.
Will, this is the Doom and Gloom podcast.
No, I'm going to incorporate hope into the pick. All right, all right. I promise. I think this will be a very Tomlin-esque game, probably a game that he will love, because I think it's going to be. I couldn't find a prop bet for punting, but my guess is there will be a lot of punts in this game, and they'll look good because it's a dome, and it's a good punting situation. So I suspect, whatever take the over on the punting if you can. I just feel like, for the reasons we just said, from the Steelers standpoint, just trying to get all the moving parts worked out in a league where you can't, you're not expected to do all that in preseason and not everybody is playing. There's that aspect. For the Falcons, yes, I think they'll have some energy early in the game, but I also think they're playing against a defense that knows it needs to hold the opponent under a certain score or they don't have a chance. So I do expect that a lot of energy from the Steelers defense. So at least early in the game, I feel like there's going to be not very much scoring. It might not be very much scoring overall. I think it's the Falcons playing at home, little bit more together on offense, with some matchup issues for the Steelers, I think, outside of pass rush. So unless Atlanta becomes totally one-dimensional and can't run the football, I expect the Falcons to win. I'll call it 16-13 for Atlanta. And I hope that you bang the under because it's 42. I don't know what kind of a person prognosticates 42 points in this game, but I'm telling you right now, bang the under.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to make the point that honestly, if both of these offenses do what they want to do, there aren't going to be many offensive possessions either. If both teams are running the ball, that means the clock is moving. So this could be a game where, a team gets maybe, 2 or 3 first down in a drive, but that doesn't even end up scoring with, the,
well,
of offensive lines being efficient in week 1 and stuff. So.
And Raheem Morris is going to be like Tomlin. He's going to punt the ball.
Yeah. Well, weren't they in Tampa Bay together at one point way back in the day too?
I believe so.
Yeah.
They're about as similar as like any coaches to Tomlin in the league. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until James Franklin gets in the league and then we'll have a whole set.
No, we are not allowing that shit to hit the NFL. Good God.
I would be, if you said to me, Mike Tomlin is definitely leaving at the end of the season, who would be the betting favorite to get the Pittsburgh Steelers job? I would say James Franklin has an excellent chance of getting the job, except for the fact that I do think that they kind of lean towards more pro coaches with pro experience, but he's the style that I think they would like.
Well, bonus question. If it's not the Steelers, who would be the most likely team to hire James Franklin?
The New York Giants.
That's a great answer.
Pretty good. Yeah.
They'll be looking for a new coach by the end of the year.
Well, and I'll say this, I do have some slight insider information. You know how bad it must be to be the GM and the head coach of that clown show when, because you are good coaches, you made the quarterback who stinks look pretty decent. And then the owner goes and forces you neither to extend Daniel Jones, forces them to extend Daniel Jones. And then now they're saddled with him when they just happen to make him look good just because they're, good coaches put a decent team around him. That's a real curse right there.
But not to mention, if you're a fan of, HBO's Hard Knocks, you all saw them being pretty enamored with the top of the draft this past year as far as quarterbacks go.
With every quarterback.
Straight up to get their guy.
Any quarterback.
Yeah, any quarterback. Yeah, that's true. Any quarterback.
Legitimate intel that no one except the owners wanted to sign Daniel Jones. Nobody. And then that's why last year when you saw them saying, hey, we want complete control or else we are leaving, that is why that event transpired. But they're stuck with him. So we'll see if the owners can swallow their pride and say, we'll give you a shot without him, because they're stuck with him for at least this year, and they're probably not going to be very good.
Yeah, Will, it's funny you said who's going to hire James Franklin next. It's going to be whoever wants to draft Drew Aller next year.
Yeah, could be.
I didn't get a chance to watch that Penn State game or whatever, so I don't know if Aller has kind of improved on the areas he's needed to, but he's got a full season to do so if he didn't exactly show that in week 1 anyway. But
tell you what,
this is just as funny of a question as there could be too.
Hey, week 1, but me and Will look pretty good right now talking about the QB class.
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, what I love is people saying watching Cam Ward play one game in the ACC and being like, oh my God, where did this guy come from? He's the best. I mean, it's like, dude's been playing for 4 years and lighting it up since his first game. So, I'm glad that people finally got around to
it. He did the same stuff versus Oregon last year. They just lost. Yeah. Like, put up like 40 on Oregon. He had like 5 of those throws last year. It's just,
that Miami is loaded.
Yeah, they can be really good. And I'll go out there and say, I know you guys are super high on Cam Ward, and I didn't get to watch the game or whatever because I was at a home opener myself. But go IU, Kurt Zignetier, by the way. But honestly, one of my favorite running backs in this next draft class is if he wants to come out is Damian Martinez, the Miami running back. I truly think he is better than Ollie Gordon and some of those other guys that get constantly mentioned up at the top of the class.
He's very good. Ashton Jeanty from Boise State.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you what though, Jeanty reminds me so much of Najee Harris. I can't watch and appreciate his play, but
I think he got more twitch. But I know. Yeah.
All right, hey, last question. Since we're talking about Final Fours, Final Four in college football this year, after seeing a week and a half.
I don't know. There's a Final 12 this year, so
I know, but I'm saying it makes it harder in a way. I mean, part of this is who's going to have the easiest path to get there. That really makes a difference, I think, in a 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you go.
I'll go first.
Well, yeah, exactly, Jeremy. You go first.
After what I saw out of Notre Dame, I think it's going to be really hard for them not to be there. They have a very easy schedule, and their defense looks terrifyingly athletic. But they have a real chance to, kind of pull off a Steelers defense not allowing many games over 20 points. And Riley Leonard is experienced. He's produced. Offense was kind of, wasn't exactly sharp in week 1. They played a good team, though, in Texas A&M. A lot of good athletic pieces there. But I think it'll be tough for Notre Dame not to be there. Gut still says Georgia will be there. I know they didn't play. I know Carson Beck didn't play that great in week 1. But
he's all right in the second half.
Yeah. He played better in the second half. And they're loaded year in, year out. Really, I think it'll be really interesting seeing what happens in the Big Ten, because I know everyone's going to say Ohio State with all the money they spent this year and NIL and all that, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see a team like Oregon represent the Big Ten this year if Oregon can beat a team like Ohio State in the national championship game, because I want to see Will Howard pass Ohio State to victory at some point. So I think he's very capable. He was very good at Kansas State, but it'll be interesting to see how much of a challenge they get, from some of the teams on their schedule. That they kind of,
as long as Oregon doesn't have to face an FCS team in the playoffs, they'll be all right.
Yeah, right. Gosh. Boy.
What about you, Korey? Who do you think?
But what's the last power conference I'm missing here?
Oh, so sorry. So it's ACC, Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12. Yeah.
You took Georgia, Notre Dame, who's independent. I think you said Oregon, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I said Oregon.
And you said Georgia.
And Georgia. Okay. Yeah.
So I know. So I'm a believer in Will Howard. Yeah, I've been a believer in him for a while. Will Howard. They've got 2 horses at running back, and when I say horses, they are horses.
They do.
Yep.
I think they're in. I think Miami's too talented. I think Miami's in. I think that's a team where they've got so much talent. They're great on the O-line. They're stacked at linebacker, which in college is such an advantage. So those are 2 that I'm pretty set on. I think Notre Dame can get in there. I think Riley Leonard's good enough to pilot that offense to where they will. Marcus Freeman could be an NFL defensive coordinator. That dude, he is nails on defense. And then question is SEC. It's such a toss up between Georgia and Alabama, and one of those 2 teams, I think they're definitely going to be in the Final Four. I think this is where it's kind of tough to predict when it gets to, playoff time, because you got to see how the bracket stacks up. But I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to say Georgia, but Alabama's definitely my number 5. So I think Notre Dame defense, Miami off of talent, Ohio State, I think, is just too loaded at the premium positions. They've got receivers too. They're just stacked. And then I'll take Georgia, but that could change.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I'll tell you who my 4 are, but I'm, it's like I can think of a couple of teams that could crash the party, but I think it's in no particular order: Georgia, Alabama, Miami, and Ohio State. That seems like the most likely 4. So if I were betting, that's how I would bet. But the way the SEC has so many teams, some of these teams get a very easy ride to get to the end, which means they might end up with a better seed than teams with that we think are perceived as being better. For instance, Arkansas and Tennessee are 2 teams that I think are nowhere on the radar right now. But I think they both have good quarterback play now, and they both have very soft schedules for SEC teams compared to what those other 2 teams got. So it wouldn't shock me if the SEC had an upset team to upset one of these other non-SEC teams when it comes down to it in the playoff. But yeah, I like and there's always a team like Texas, or Oklahoma that if they got the right matchup could do well. But I don't know who'd win out of those 4, but I'll take Notre Dame, as you said, their defense is unbelievable. So once again, if their defense matches up against a team that's really dependent on their offense, that could be a good matchup for them. But I'll say Alabama, Georgia, Miami, and Ohio State, and good luck picking from those.
I'll throw something else too, is that Oklahoma, they're not known for defense. They are loaded on defense. They have multiple dudes on that defense. Where
I think this year with the transfers and NIL, the last couple of years, some teams are really loaded up. Sorry, Korey.
Oh no, that's pretty much it. But Oklahoma's got 2 dudes who are among the maybe not top of the line NFL prospects, but like in terms of college players,
Stutzman.
And I don't know. It's going to be really fun. I think that this is a good year for the 12-team playoffs because there's just so many teams with talent that there's going to be some crazy stuff happening in the playoffs and some crazy stuff late in the season where it's going to be a lot of fun this year.
Well, next week, I'll throw it out there now. Non-Power 4 sleeper team this year. I got a weird one for you. You ready?
Yeah.
University of Texas, San Antonio. They got Josh McCown's kid playing quarterback.
Mm.
Their receiving targets, like their skill players, are stupid. They're so good. And they're probably going to have a gaudy record because of the conference that they play in. So I think you've got a good quarterback play, and you got good, better than average defensive team and a good offensive team. One of those teams is going to get in the 12. That's the way this is going to work. So
is Jeff Traylor still there, their coach?
I can't remember if he left 2 years ago or if he's still the coach. There was a thing going on with him, but I don't know what happened. Sorry, I apologize to you UTSA fans out there. But I like them.
What's crazy too is you just look at the rankings. We haven't even mentioned Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona, who will be 3 of the top 15 offenses in the country.
Another great one. Yeah, Arizona's another great one. Yeah.
All 3 of them could crash the party.
Yeah, kudos to Tora McMillan, I think is his name. Good God, man. Good God.
Ridiculous.
Good God. 304 yards and 4 touchdowns, shattering the previous Arizona record, and came 1 yard shy of a 5th touchdown too. So, good Lord.
By the way, Jeff Traylor's still the head coach.
Okay. Yeah. So, he was mentioned as one of those coaches, but a lot of, searches were very high on, but, I just don't think he ever saw a true team to go do. So
Oh, McCown's a good-looking young quarterback, and they get to Curry and Clark at midseason or something with after coming off his injury. So, yeah, team to watch out for. You'll see.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our first episode back on the SteelerFury.com podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the message boards, joined by Korey Karbowsky, you know, as Korey39, and Wil Masisak, Bradshaw to Ben. Gentlemen, as Russell Wilson used to say on his old team, Broncos country, let's ride. But now it's here we go, Steelers, here we go. So, well, I guess we'll just find out how far we truly go.
We're going somewhere.
Yep, going somewhere.
That's our new motto. Pittsburgh Steelers, going somewhere.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Go Steelers.
Steelers.
Later on.